All right. Welcome back, everybody. And I hope you were we here last week? No, I think I had to cancel last week. But welcome back. We're in the middle of a conversation on Tikkun Hamidot. Now, I've done this class before. I've actually ran this series several times over the last few years. The people that take these lessons seriously walk away with profound insight into themselves and, more importantly, into creating a deeper vision of who they can be. Now, all too often in life, we kind of get stuck into this picture of like, well, this is who I am, take it or leave it. You know, like these are my midot. This is the way I relate to things in the world. And if you don't like it, you know, shalom. I can't change. But the truth is that is there a process to change? No worries. And the truth is that word, change, I don't like that word. Because change means that you're turning yourself from something into something that you're not. You're metamorphosizing into something different. And I think that the word that I would prefer to use is grow, evolve, mature, develop. Those are the words that I like to use when it comes to these conversations about, you know, practicing this concept of musar, where we look at and ask questions about what are our midot, these midot that define us. How can we create a world where we're aware of what the midot are and become greater people? So there's a very powerful practice of meditation that happens. So, for example, like we're going to talk about the idea of being mindful, having hakara, being aware of a midah. What does that mean? So, like we spoke about this, I believe last time we met, we said that we spoke about this idea of having savlanut, of having patience, right? And we said that the word savlanut, patience, is something that we all believe we have. Some of us are more patient than others, but how would we work on becoming more patient? Why is it important to becoming more patient, right? If we live in a society which is, constantly asking us to, divide our attention, go back and forth. You know, you're trying to work on a project, and you have 15 messages on your phone, 17 emails pop in all at once. You're getting a Instagram message, you're getting a Facebook message. You're being pulled in so many different directions. There's no question that we are living in a time where our attention is being pulled in so many different places, and therefore we become somewhat impatient with the world that we are living in. And therefore, the question is, how do I add patience to my life? Doesn't everyone here want to work on being more patient? Yes. So how do we do that? Okay, so how do we do that? So the first thing is something called hakara, which is having awareness. Okay, so how do I develop the awareness? The awareness would begin with someone taking this trait of patience and saying, you know, I'm working on patience, and therefore I'm going to create a journal. There's several steps of this. Number one is journaling. If you are not journaling, if you don't have a diary at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, whichever works best for you, on your phone, by your bed, you're not moving anywhere in life. If you want to, you know, the quote that I just posted a couple of days ago was, if you have a dream without a due date, it's a fairy tale, right? or what's that?
He quoted you.
He said a nightmare?
He turned it into a nightmare.
No, I didn't say nightmare. I said fairy tale. I said fairy tale. He said a nightmare. That wasn't my quote. My quote was fairy tale. Right? When you have it, I would never say that. I would never say 100%. Meaning like
if I say like, okay, I want to get married in 2020, May 2023. I mean, May 1st.
Whatever.
It's not. How can I do that? You know, if it's not going to happen, I'm going to be upset.
100%. But if the idea of a dream means that there's a vision of something that I want to bring into the world, and therefore having the dream without clarifying how you're going to get there means you're not going anywhere. Remember the famous story in Alice in Wonderland when Alice is standing there and she's at a fork in the road and she looks at the cat and she's like, oh my God, there's a fork in the road. Which way do I go? And he says, well, where do you want to go? Mm-hmm. She says, I don't know. It doesn't matter at the end, right? It doesn't matter where you're going. And the same is true with our dreams, with our visions. Meaning, like, if we don't have clarity as to where we want to end up in the next, 1 year, in the next 2 years, 10 years, whatever that goal is, then you're not getting there. So the question is, how do we clarify? How do we create that vision of what it means to be a better, greater version of myself. Because if we're not striving for more, and this is, again, we spoke about last week, we spoke this idea of being a kadosh, someone who is holy. Holiness is defined by the boundaries that we create, right? Creating a space that is able to be sanctified, something being kodesh lechol, right? Moving away from the chol into the kedusha, moving away from the mundane into the supernatural. That can only happen when there's a boundary. What gives marriage sanctity? Right?
Kedushin.
What's special about the kedushin that makes it kadosh? What are you saying at the chuppah? Under the chuppah, the chatan is telling to the kala, I am to you and you are to me,
Kadosh.
and we become mutar to each other, permissible to one another, but prohibited to everybody else. So on that wedding day, what you're saying is that, like, I am to you and only you and nobody else. That boundary of marriage is where the sanctity of marriage comes from. You know, I often challenge young people today. I say, well, why do you want to get married? They're like, what do you mean, why do I want to get married? You're the rabbi, you tell me, why should I get, like, you came to me, like, why do you want to get, like, you know, like, you're already living together, you know what I'm saying? Like, there is no sanctity of marriage left anymore. Why do you need that special ketubah, that certificate that says that you're married? Like, who cares? Yeah. I'm like, no, it's like, well, we had it, it's a nice thing, we want the children now, and children is a little different, this and that. But, like, you know, ultimately, there's no real reason why you need to get married with a rabbi. Like, if it's, you know, like, if it was really that important, you would have thought about all the things that come before this conversation. But they're not having that conversation, which ultimately leads into another conversation as to how do you know this relationship is actually a good relationship to be in? Because for most of us, for most younger people today, we are in relationships that are about convenience. And the real focus and purpose of a relationship in general, all relationships, are designed to challenge us so that we could evolve into something bigger and better. Every circumstance that we're in is there to challenge us to become something bigger, greater, and better. My Monday night taxi swipe that swiped my car as I was driving home from my class on Monday night was there to challenge me, you know, and it's been the challenge for my whole entire week that I've been dealing with. Insurance companies, car companies, police reports, blah, 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 whatever it is, but it's kapara, all good. It's designed to challenge me. Could I have allowed myself to get angry at this cab driver who just wasn't paying attention, was speeding, and did an illegal move to cut me off? 100% I could have, but what good would have that done? Of course it doesn't help me. So now, I've said this before, I spent 18 months working on Self-Restraint. And what I ended up discovering is that the first part of being sovel, the first part of being a savlan, right, is recognizing that you first have to identify that there's something that is irritating you. So this is how it goes. Number one is recognizing the irritant. Someone is bothering you, a boss, a friend, a coworker, a spouse, relative, child, whatever it is. I just wanted my space right now. Whatever it is, you know, whoever it is, there's something that's bothering me. Now I'm feeling that urge to say something and do something, right? So what do? I respond immediately. You know that feeling where you feel like the temperature gauge is really high and, like, anything that walks in any moment, like, is going to get lashed out and they're going to get the brunt of whatever it is that you're dealing with on that day. So the first way of being able to hold that back, pull it back, is to not respond. Yeah. To not respond. But not to ignore the feeling and the emotion. Not to, here's a chair for me. Not to, I'll move over. Not to ignore the feeling or the emotion, but rather to wait in your response. That's the key. The key in dealing with savlanut is not to ignore the emotion. So let's say someone comes in and you just want to say, oh yeah, well, you too, right? And instead of responding, you're going to hold that feeling in for 5 minutes, and then you're going to say what you got to say. The first step of savlanut is being able to be sovel, to carry the burden of that pain, that frustration that you're going through, right? So I'm carrying it, I'm not going to wait now. So what do I do? Very good, Rabbi. So I did it. Yeah, like you got to text the rabbi. Rabbi, today I had the, what's it called? I got it. I was going to be Sovel. I had my spouse, friend, whoever it is, came in and annoyed me. I waited 5 minutes. Thank you so much. No. Okay, so that's the beginning of the process. First, it's the awareness that counts. And therefore, what I would have you do is journal, okay, for the next, 90 days. Every single day, I want you to be, number one, aware twice a day that you are working on patience. I'm working on not responding. I'm working on waiting the 5 minutes. Just awareness alone is part of the process of the development and the growth. It's about sensitizing yourself to the midah that you want to work on, right? If you want to work on being more humble, well, first we have to define what humility is, right? And then we have to come up with a plan of introducing that midah to you in the world that you're living in. In the old world, there was two different ways of dealing with character development. There's something called shvirat hamidot, the breaking of a midah, right? And there's something called tikkun hamidot. Now, what we learned with shvirat hamidot is that when you break a midah, you end up getting two bad midot at the end, right? It doesn't really work. The way in which we develop ourselves is only through positive reinforcement. Negative stuff doesn't work. You want to train a monkey to jump through a hula hoop on fire, it only works through the constant micro positive reinforcement of every single movement of that monkey until he's able to jump through that hoop. Yeah. It doesn't work with saying, "Oh, you're clumsy monkey, you're idiot, you're nuts." It doesn't work like that. You can't train the monkey that way. Every animal in the world is trained exactly the same way, right? This is true, by the way, with our family, our spouses, our children. You want to go ahead and get your children, your spouse to do something, the only way to do it is by finding those micro steps that get them to do what you want to do and reinforcing those positive moments over and over again. Negativity doesn't work. Shvirat kelim doesn't work. But if we talk about tikkun hamidot, right, that process, which is what we're going to talk about today, and this is very much a part of the Musar practice that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was created and developed for us. And he has this 3-step process, which we're going to go through together today, God willing, that talks about how we can use these 3 stages of sensitivity and development to allow us to grow into something bigger and better. Okay, so here we go. Turn to page number 2. Stage number 1 is sensitivity. So we spoke about this. So we said you begin Musar practice by becoming sensitive to soul traits that are operating within you. And how are they motivating you to think, say, and do the things that you do? You heighten your awareness to those things that you're working favorably that you need that are in need of your attention. Before you could really move forward, you need to see clearly how your soul traits are operating within you. So therefore, if let's say you're working on, again, going back to patience. But let's say you're generally like a really easy kind of going, like I'm an easy kind of going guy. Like I don't get like rallied up. I don't have patience. I don't have issues with patience. I'm very naturally sovel. But that doesn't mean I can't become a better, more patient version of myself. I can. And therefore, if I'm working on it, then how do I get there? So first is being aware of your own spectrum of the midah itself. Where do you fall into the category 1 to 10 of patience? How do you categorize yourself? Are you super impatient? Are you super patient? Are you somewhat in between? Are you a little bit more to the right, more to the left on that spectrum? Where do you fall? How do you understand yourself? Start thinking about who you are for a moment and where you fall into that spectrum of that particular midah. Okay? Rabbi Yecheskel Levinson, who was trained in the Musar Center in Kelm and went to the great influences and went on to be the great influence in the last generation, highlights in his book Or Yecheskel. He says like this. He said it was often stated in the Beit Talmud of Kelm that in order for a man to listen and understand Musar, he first has to sensitize his feelings. Without that, he might listen and learn for an entire lifetime and not know at all what Musar is and what it demands of him. Because Musar involves the most delicate sensitivity. Sensitivity means being aware of the seed of a thought, word, feeling, or a deed as early as possible in the cycle of germination and birth. The earlier, you can see what is arising, the more you'll have choice over the course of that inner impulse will take. So let's look at a familiar example. So you have a spouse, a child, friend, who you regularly do scheduled activities with, who is never on time. So you're at the door, you're ready to go with just the right amount of time available not to be late. So Mr. Slowpoke is changing, Mrs. Slowpoke is changing her shoes, sorry, ladies, one more time. Or Mr. Tardy is making one more phone call. Or little Latenik is squeezing in one more text messages. And you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and then suddenly you blow your top and yell. But wait, was it really suddenly that the feeling of impatience exploded within you? If you were actually sensitive to your own feelings as they came to life and go through their development cycle, you would have been aware of the first tiny flashes of impatience as they sparked to life. Soon, after you'd felt that glow of heat growing and growing, and you all know what I'm talking about, then there would have been occasionally flashes of lightning and rumble and thunder, and only after the storm had built up its full perfection would it break out into a torrent. Sensitivity means having sharp awareness so that you see what is happening within you, even if the symptoms are very subtle, because that's all too often where it actually begins. If you're feeling already the anger, the bubble, and you're at a point of like just being holding back, you're already too late. You have to be mindful of the process itself. And that's why when I talk about being sensitive or being aware, hakara, having that awareness is where these midot begin. How do you start? Journal every single day. Today at 2:00, my coworker came in and I wanted to go ahead and blah, blah, blah. And I realized it right there and I wrote it down. Journal it. Today, I thought nothing happened today, but I spent twice during the day at 11 o'clock and at 4 o'clock. I have a reminder on my phone that goes up and says, spend 2 minutes right now to be mindful of patience. How did it impact your day? Start thinking about the midah that you want to work on and bring it into the forefront of your mind over and over again. Like it's, for example, like if you want to go to the gym tomorrow morning because you're having a hard time, it's too cold outside, the way in which you get there is not when you wake up in the morning and push yourself to do it. You already failed if you waited in the morning to go to the gym. The way you go to the gym is the night before, you take out your gym clothing, you set up your gym bag, you leave it by the door, okay? You put a reminder in the phone before you go to sleep. You go to sleep on time so you have enough sleep so you're not tired in the morning. And now when you wake up, you're ready to go. You're ready there. So when we talk about building ourselves up, create the process. What does the process look like? Let's start at the beginning. How are you creating an awareness for yourselves that this is something that you want to do? You want to work on being more loving, more caring, more giving. Same idea. Well, how are you bringing those ideas into your life? How are you bringing those? How are you becoming aware of those things? So step number one when it comes to growth and development is being sensitive to the matter itself, having hakara, awareness of the midah that you're trying to improve in. If you don't have that, you're not going anywhere. And by the way, this happens all too often. I see it, people who live religious lives and they're putting on their tefillin every single day and they go to synagogue, they go to class, and you see they're horrible people. Right? Well, how is that possible? My mom always says to me, like, well, he's religious. Those religious people, you can't trust those religious people, you know? and it kills me every time she says it, but I know what she's saying.
She's right.
Why are all those people in that neighborhood always triple parking? You know, why are those people in that area? Why is there so much insurance fraud happening in that area? Why? I'm like, oh, okay. Well, listen, people are people. You know, my favorite is when she says to me, you know, you're a rabbi. You should really, you know, don't you remember about Kivat Avim? You know, reminding you about, the law,
It's not only for rabbis, for everyone.
I know, I say it all the time. I'm like, listen, I have a bigger Yetzer Hara, so you should understand that. So, okay, so number one is sensitivity, being sensitively aware of the trait that you're trying to work on. Just if my mom ever listens to this, because I know she does, when it comes to Kivat Avim, I was aware, very cognizantly aware that it's something I needed to improve. So this was about 14 years ago. I had a conversation with my mother, because my mother always complains that our relationship was struggling, you know. So I'm like, what do you need?
Listening?
She's not here right now, but she'll listen later. She'll call me. I get feedback all the time, right? So or my aunts, whatever it is, they have like a whole thing going on over there. So I interviewed her. I'm like, well, tell me what you need from me. She's like, at the very least, she's like, I need you to call me every single day.
Wow. I should tell my kids that.
right?
No, but
So
it's nice.
I took it upon.
She said something.
I know, because I saw I was failing and I wasn't
Yeah,
doing
wow.
what she needed.
That's right.
So I decided to take it upon
phone.
myself that every single day I have an alarm that went off on my phone. It said call mom, and I'd call her every single day. I had to become aware of it, right? I had to first be aware of the fact that there's something wrong, right? Then I had to go through the process of articulating becoming sensitive to it, and then coming up with a way of figuring it out. Now, it works when I get into a good schedule of things. So it used to be for like the last 8 years, I used to drive my kids to school, and it worked very nicely. But when I come here in the morning, I have to get on a 6 o'clock train, and I'm teaching in the morning. Then it kind of throws off my schedule, so I'd be more mindful of it now. But she knows that every single time I'm calling, it's during a crazy part of my day, and the fact that I'm putting in that little effort, she feels love. That's it. And if I could do a little bit of that to make her feel good, I try.
Why didn't you know that? Why did you need
Because
me to
guys
tell
are
you?
stupid. I don't know. We don't. I'll tell you what. You notice, it's so hard to understand what someone wants, because naturally I'm going to love her the way I want to be loved. And the way you love me is by just leaving me alone. No. That's true for most men, right? But so therefore, so the truth is that everyone has a different love language, and therefore I realized just like for example, my wife, her love language is quality time, and that means if I don't give my wife 15 minutes a day of eye contact, that I'm talking to her like that, she feels ignored and unloved. I could do everything for her. I could send her flowers that day. I could send her cards. I could have extra cleaning people come to the house and clean everything for her, whatever it is.
I think she's right.
Okay, but
More than 15.
But I'm just saying, minimally, that's her now. Now, some people don't need that. Some people need, I need gifts. You don't give me gifts. Some people need words of affirmation. Some people need, touch. Everyone has their own unique language. And I realize it's true for parents as well. And therefore, I had to figure out what her love language is. And for her, my mother's quality time, by the way, also. So at the very least, it's the phone call. At the very least, it's Sunday, why aren't you at my house?
And what was more on the list your mother gave you?
More.
One.
That's that. I start with that. Let me first work on one thing and try to get it right, and see what I could do more.
Do you have a night with your wife out?
Unfortunately, not enough. No, we have very crazy schedules because we're out teaching at nights. So she's going to be here tonight. Wednesday night's her night here. She teaches a class on Sniut, I think right now. But anyway, no, we don't do that enough. We should do it more often. It's also harder because I have a 22-year-old and a 5-year-old. So a 22-year-old, I'm dealing with.
And watch the fight.
Yeah.
No, the 22-year-old's going on dates. Right, and the 5-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old each need different things. And the truth is, the biggest lesson.
Suggestion.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I think you and your wife should go away for
Yeah.
2 days. It doesn't have to be over shops. Leave Sunday morning.
Right?
Your 22-year-old could take care of the family, or the 15.
No, you can't.
Or the 5-year-old could go to a friend's house.
I could,
I have
I
friends who
could.
have little kids. I don't like my suggestion.
I love your suggestion. I did it when my kids were at a place where they could do it, where they could kind of care for themselves. But right now, I'm in that weird stage. I need a couple more years before I can do that again. All right, number 2, self-restraint. All right, after you become sensitive to the negative role a trait is playing in your life, you got to make some conscious effort to steer your action that arises from that trait. This is a behavioral stage of Musar practice. So now, we talk about informed by your sensitivity. You swing into action using the power of your will to try to rein in potentially soul-damaging behavior or push yourself to engage in soul-nourishing behavior that is currently lacking. So let's look at the idea of self-restraint. Okay, we're going to let's look at that, right? So talk about honor, which we're going to do as a midah a little bit later. Let's say that you're sensitive to the fact that you have a real habit of judging other people, and in doing so in a way that puts them down. Okay, some of us have this. Just like we're stuck with these Middot that we're born with, and we have to overcome. So you're aware of this habit of dishonoring others through judgment, and it generates specific inner sensations, and you can identify these feelings. The next task for a Musar practitioner is to exercise self-restraint. And I'd go so far as to say that you are obligated to do so because the excuse that you are unconscious of your behavior is no longer available to you. And the more conscientious or aware of the emotions that stir you are, the more you become a Adam. Just be mindful that the Vilna Gaon reminds us there are 5 different words to express a human being. there's Adam, there's a
Enosh.
one second. There's Adam, Gever, Enosh, Ben Adam, and Ish. Ish is the highest level. Okay, Ish is the highest level of expression of man. Adam is the lowest. Each one of those different
Adam
rungs.
came from the Adamah.
Adamah, that's right. But the question is, why is Ben Adam number 4? I don't have a good answer. But anyway, Kitzur is that this idea is that there is different stages of a human development, and it has to do with how consciously aware we are of who we are and the universe itself and our place in the universe itself. So when you are aware of that inner unconscious behavior, you become less animal and more human. Further down the road, you want to look at what specifically is motivating your tendency to dishonor others. But at this stage, all you're concerned about is restraint of the tendency itself. So here are the two suggestions of behavioral practices to counteract the propensity to be judgmental. Number one is to take one practice that we find in the Talmud, which is to greet everyone you meet with prompt word and a smiling face. That's right. It sounds simple and maybe even trite, but if you're only that, right? If it's only that, why would the Talmud, right? And the Gemara in Talmud says, trumpet the fact that no one ever greeted Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai first, not even a Gentile in the marketplace. Try the practice. If you find resistance in particular cases where you meet people, take a good hard look at the resistance. Where is it coming from? I've tried doing this, by the way. There's actually a custom, a Kabbalistic custom, that in the month of Adar, anyone who asks you for charity, you should give them something. Even a penny. You shouldn't turn away anyone in the month of Adar. There's a special power in the month of Adar that at the end of the month, if you're actually able for 30 days to give to every single person, you could go back to God and say, just like I didn't turn away anyone for the last 30 days, don't turn me away in my request.
And if it's Adar Aleph, Adar Bet, when is to give?
So that's a good question. Today is officially
second day of
Shushan Purim Katan.
Right. No, I thought
Right.
yesterday was Purim Katan.
Yes, it was Purim Katan. That means today is Shushan Purim Katan, right? So it's the truth is that the month of Adar Aleph and Bet both have the spiritual power, because what's the sign for the month of Adar? Pisces. That's right. And Pisces are 2 fish, not 1 fish, right? And it's one's for Adar Aleph, one's for Adar Bet. So the power of Adar is you have 2 months of Mishin Nichnas Adar Mar missing class. So they're both there. Which is why some people will have a small Seudah yesterday for Purim Katan as a way of amplifying this level of happiness in the world that we're living in today. Okay, so yeah, you can take advantage of it. Definitely take advantage of it. So try this practice, and if you find resistance, fine. Figure out where it's coming from. Is it serving you? Do you want to have your inner and outer life governed by your motivation? Second practice of this type is to help you overcome tendencies to judge others by cultivating a soul trait of honor, kavod. The logic is simple. If you develop more honor for others, then you'll be less inclined to execute judgment over them. The type of honor that is involved here is the honor at the level of the soul, where you acknowledge that a person who is before you, your eyes, or your mind has been created in the image of God. Only when you focus on more superficial level, the nefesh level of the soul, do all the flaws and deficiencies that you find in an individual come into a higher relief. When you focus at a deeper level, on the neshama level of the soul that innately glows radiantly with each of us, then those flaws are merely light debris floating on the surface of the deep, luminous sea. So we're talking about this concept of building out a recognition that when you have this level of self-restraint, clarity of intention as to what midah you want to cultivate, the more awareness you have, the more likely you'll be able to overcome that particular midah. So, give me a midah, right? Whatever it is.
Humility.
What's that?
Or do you want it to one?
Yeah.
Humility.
So, what does it mean to be humble? Right, and we're going to do this again in detail. Humility, most people on a subconscious level believe that word comes from the word humiliate. And therefore, humility means to be humble, to be small, and to be shy, sitting in the corner, the guy who's always with his head bowed down, who's always... And that's a mistake, because who is the most humble man that lived in the world? Moshe. Well, does he sound like a shy kind of guy who's sitting in the corner? The guy who goes up into the heavens and fights with the angels? The guy who comes down and fights with Og and all these other, fights with Paro? Right? He doesn't sound like a shy, meek kind of person. He sounds like a very proactively aggressive kind of person. Because what the word humility really means, anivut, anava, means to have a deep appreciation of when you need to be big and when you need to be small. So someone who's struggling with humility, I would tell them it depends which spectrum on the humility scale you're suffering with. Maybe your problem of humility is that you're too big and you need to work on being small. Or maybe you're too small and you need to work on being big. So for a person who's too big, I tell them, big people who are... What's that? Sion? No? Okay, sorry. So you have a situation where you're trying to work on being big. How do you work on being big? Or let's say you're big and you want to work on being small. I tell them to wear clothing that don't match for like a week. Make yourself look like small. Sit in the corner. Don't sit. Try to do something that puts you a little bit off away from the center of attention. Because a big person always needs to be the center of attention. They're wearing flamboyant clothing. They're really loud. They're out there. It's all just part of their personality. That's what they want. So that person should work on being small by doing the opposite things. Keeping quiet. Don't dress so loudly. A person who's small, I tell them, find the loudest clothing you could possibly wear, right? And dress like that for a week. Like draw attention to yourself. Don't sit in the corner of the room, stand in the middle. Do the opposite of your midah to help draw yourself out, to find that balance. But again, it's being aware of the midah and then creating the practice that helps you overcome that unique challenge that you find yourself struggling with within that midah itself. A practice that cultivates this perspective is to prepare yourself with a brief phrase to recite yourself whenever you become aware of a tendency to judge others. So the phrase that we have over here is each one is a radiant soul. And we'll do that with each midah. We're going to go through. I'm going to give you like a phrase that you have on the top of your sheet, your charting, and you're going to be mindful and repeat like a mantra this phrase that says each person or each one is a radiant soul, or each person was created b'tselem Elokim. Whatever that is, right? This one too is an neshama. This is just one example. So Musar means to constantly guide your words and deeds in regards to these soul traits on your spiritual curriculum. If you're aware that you are impatient, you got to strive to be more patient. If you have a tendency to lust, you got to be consciously direct your eyes the other way. If you are stingy, it is your will that tells you that to hand each to take your hand and reach into your pockets or purse. I recall an incident. This is true. I remember that when I walked by a plate of cookies. I wasn't hungry, but these cookies appealed to my greed. So I asked myself if it was in my capacity not to reach out my hand, and it was, and I didn't. Exercising your will to do some things and not to do others is a great and necessary practice. When you see someone doing everything they feel like doing, right, what do you call that person? A child. Right?
Impulsive.
Or impulsive, right? You can come up with all kinds of adjectives, but like we understand that children will actually feel something and that's it. Their feelings define their reality. The difference between a child and an adult, ready, is that a child will first, how do I say this again? A child will first decide if they like you and then hear what you have to say. An adult does the opposite. An adult first wants to hear what you have to say and then decide if they like you, right? A child lives in a world of complete emotion and their emotion defines their world. I'm seeing more and more young people live in this reality. I don't feel like it, Rabbi. Well, who says that you have to do what you feel? Why is the feeling the emotion that defines my reality and not the proper cerebral choice that we make? Right? Why isn't it something that's calculated? Why isn't it something that is more specific and targeted? Why haven't I spent time articulating the emotion that I want? Why am I not doing that? Why am I surrendering the highest parts of who I am? Remember, we believe as Jews that there's a duality in us. You have what we call an animal soul and an elevated soul. Okay? We call it the body and the soul. The guf and the neshama. The guf has its own wants. The guf is where your emotions are coming from, most of them. Okay? I feel hungry, I feel tired, I feel lazy, I feel like I'm not doing anything, I'm feeling depressed, right? I'm feeling unhappy. All of those emotions are coming from your body. The neshama is a part of you that says, I have infinite potential, I can do anything. It's the part of you that's the most hopeful. It's a part of you that never gives up. It's a part of you that wants to live a life of meaning and success. So what are we doing to bring that part of ourselves into the world? Most of us are lazy. Most of us don't spend enough time in clarifying who we want to become. And that's what this is. Like, I'm empowering each of you to think more broadly about what does it mean to be you. And we have these ideas like, oh, I'm going to be married, I'm going to have children, I'm going to build a house, I'm going to go on vacations, I'm going to save the world. Whatever those dreams are, you don't give up on them, right? Well, what do you need to do to become something or someone that is able to have those things? God wants to give you everything, but what would happen if he did? He would turn you into a charity case. And God loves you too much to turn you into a charity case. So what does he do? He creates circumstances where he withholds things from you so that you could evolve and choose to become something bigger and better. And in that process, you, my friends, have earned your independence. You become you. He could have easily programmed you to do exactly what you do. Like Sam Harris believes, he's a famous physicist, philosopher who believes that, he's a Jew, not religious, who believes that human beings don't have free will. It's an illusion. There is no free will, that all you are is a reflection of your impulses, emotions, and desires and wants, and there's nothing that you're really choosing. You have no choice. You can't control yourself. And I philosophically disagree with him, because if we actually accept the fact that we have no free will, then there's no court system. How could someone go to jail for killing? How could someone get arrested? And this, by the way, this is the approach today of, unfortunately, that you see what's happening. You've seen the videos of these people going shoplifting and like,
Terrible.
it's horrible.
Yeah.
No consequences anymore. It was last week, I think I got.
Every week.
It's.
every
I
day.
saw one last week in the Prada store, where there was a bunch of people that walked in and walked out with a bunch of purses, and the security guard didn't stop them.
Yeah,
You know,
nobody.
they are afraid of it.
The security guard just stood to the side and watched them walk out. He didn't want to get involved.
Yeah, Read Eat now. They close Read Eat because people like actually steal so many stuff, so they actually
You can't keep it open.
They can't. Yeah.
The police
They can't
doesn't do
survive
anything.
anymore.
So
No one
it's
could do
like-
it. Yeah, there's nothing. There's no nothing anymore. So why are those people? Well, those people, they're poor, they're oppressed,
They need a
this and that, and whatever it is. They need a $10,000 product back.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't need.
Their family.
They don't need that.
Sell it?
You know what I'm saying? Like, of course not.
How
But when
much
you
is
create a
that?
society that says you are your emotions, you are your feelings, and that your feelings define your reality, your emotions define how you are. So if I feel like stealing something, that's okay. He can't control himself because he has no free will. So why should he go to jail? It's not fair. Or you create an oppressive white system, right? That only benefits a certain class of people. This is the way that the society thinks today. We reject these ideas. No, if you are in fact a human being, that means you have the power of control, that you have the power of choice, you have the power of using your bechira, your free will, to become something bigger. Are you allowing yourselves to create a reality where you're just going into the cycle of your own emotions? How are you pushing yourself to become bigger? How are you pushing yourself to become something more? Oh, you have relationships with your parents, spouses, friends, whatever it is. Well, what do you do to become better at them? Oh, I got it all figured out. No, you don't. Because if you're standing still and you're not moving forward, you know what's happened? You, my friends, have been left behind. The world is always moving forward.
Okay, so how I do that?
What's that?
Tell me how I do that.
The world is always, so I'm telling you, the world is
So many
always,
people, I'm like, okay,
there's so
what?
many, think about it, like the world is always moving forward. And if you're standing still because you're managing it, you're really moving backwards.
Right.
And therefore, the only way to keep up, which is really hard, this is why we say, when it says that Yaakov bikesh leshev b'shalva, Yaakov wanted to sit in peace,
Like
Yeshev
Yaakov.
Yaakov, right? He wanted to sit in peace. We said, no, there's no such thing as shalva in this world.
בעליו רוגזו של דינה.
That's right. Right? Dinah afterwards was apprehended, and the whole story unfolded as a result of his wanting to chill. There is no chilling for us. And now we are living in the most, I would argue, we're living in the greatest time in history. Okay? You have the most luxuries possibly that human beings could ever think of. You are living wealthier than any king in the world. You have more power today than any king that lived before you. Okay? No king could sit in their bed, not say a word, lift their hand and push a button and have food delivered to your door, right? Back then, the king would have to ring a bell, call someone, and that was a whole process. Today, you gotta do nothing, right? You have instant service. No chutzpah. Ask Siri, hey, what's going on? Can you give me it? And boom, it's there. It comes to my house. It's beautiful, right? Powerful. But what this has done in return is it has made us smaller. Because we live in a world where we're measuring chitzoni progress and not pnimi progress. External progress versus inner progress. What does inner progress look like? Inner progress means that, like, I know that these are my traits. I've spent time studying my traits. I spent time understanding who I am, and I recognize that there are faults within me, that I could be better, I could be more refined as a human being. And therefore, I'm in an ongoing process of working through my midot so I can become something bigger. I want to become an ish. I want to become a human being. Right? Those words are not just masculine, they're both for male and female. Okay, so we have a little bit more, and we'll talk about transformation in a minute. I'm on the bottom of page 3. Exercising your will to do things and not do others is great and necessary practice. This sort of action will bring your outer life closer in line with your inner life, which itself is a Torah value. In time, Musar teachers assure us that the effort we make to steer our behavior through self-restraint will trigger internal change. They saw great benefit in using our own behavior as a transformative tool. We already encountered that by saying in the 16th century Sefer Chinuch, to the fact that one's heart is drawn after one's outer actions, right? We say it a little bit differently. We say, "B'makom sh'adam rotzeh lalech, molichin oto," right? So we, in the direction that a person wants to go, and we draw them there. So you decide. You want to be stagnant? Fine. Live in a world of stagnation. Just be mindful you're going to be left behind. You want to live in a world of growth, and by the way, everyone here is growth-oriented. If you're here on a Wednesday, you're already doing, but all the people here as well, you're all very much growth-oriented individuals. So you're part of that process, but it's not enough to go, like, for example, it's not enough to go to a shiur and hear something.
It's practice.
How are you internalizing it? What are you doing with it? Like, knowing something, I had a teacher who used to tell me that if you're at the very least, if you're learning something, you have an obligation to teach it to somebody else to make it real. And it's not going anywhere, just staying with you. It's a waste of potential. It's got to grow. It's got to develop you into something bigger. Turn you into a giver, turn something more. In this week's Parsha, we talk about the machzit hashekel. I saw this actually a very cool idea. The Vilna Gaon says that the word machzit, right, which means like half a shekel. He says, you look at the middle letter, it's a tzaddik, right? The tzaddik represents tzedakah, represents righteousness. If you look at the two letters right next to it, are chet and yud, right? So he says the person that's always giving tzedakah, he is given life. He's chai, he's alive. The outer two letters, right, is met, mem and taf, right? The people that are not giving, they're not really living.
That's right.
It's true.
They're not really living.
Because it's
We
not
lost out.
synergy.
So
Synergy,
what
you
a-
need to
what a
give
deep-
to get. You know
I
what I'm
mean, that's
saying?
right.
So if you don't do that, it's actually nothing happening in your life. It's like you don't feel alive.
But the truth,
you know?
the same. That's my point. The same idea is with yourself. You're thinking about giving is always about how I help the poor guy, right? Oh, he doesn't have food. I'll give him. I'm giving. That is beautiful, very high
No,
level.
but the synergy, I was the word. I can tell you, I did. I mean, I was so surprised to see that I did some chesed. I gave some money that actually it was hard for me to give this amount. But I said, just because it's hard for you, you're gonna give it. And anyway, I gave it, and then a week after, I walk on the street and I found the same amount double.
Nice.
And the same,
I found it. That's the best.
I found it on the
Yeah.
street.
Well,
Yeah,
who does
like
it belong to?
Well, now it belongs to her.
Yeah,
So,
and
but
it
I would
was
say it a little
like,
differently.
wow,
I
never found
see
this
that
amount on
that
the street.
is the typical way of thinking about giving. I know that if I give, I'm going to get in return. And
No,
I
but
get that.
Yeah, I never think about I'm gonna get it. I'm
No,
like,
but you
when
don't
I
have to
give,
think
I
about it
just
because the
give.
nature of the word
I-
natan.
I grew up like this. My mother all the time. You give, the more you give, the
More
more
you get. It's a
back.
boomerang,
No,
right?
but this was like I was shocked because it was literally like at the same week, like it's the same day after, like at the same. I'm like, what? God, thank you so much. Wow, this is like wow.
The word in
It's a
Hebrew,
miracle.
natan, is a palindrome, right? You could read it forward and backwards, right? It goes both ways. It always comes back, no matter which way you go, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. That's one form of giving, and that's beautiful, to be aware of giving to other. But the greatest gift that you can give is a refined version of yourself. It's easy to go ahead and stick your hand in your pocket and give a guy $100, even if it's hard, right? It's easier, but the best thing you can give is someone who's refined. Now, we know that children are born as selfish beings. They naturally understand that for them in their world, that life is only about one thing, taking. What can I take? How can I? That's right. How can I go ahead? I see it with my kids. I have a 5-year-old daughter who I'm in love with, and she has me wrapped around her fingers. But please, can I? So I've developed a little bit of a resistance to her by thinking about if like this. If she was in the room and she was 20 years old, and she was watching this interaction, what would she want me to do for her? To give in to her, or to do something else with her, or not to give in to her? How am I building her as a person? And when I have that thought process in my mind, I'm able to resist her mesmerizing chants, her manipulative trance that she puts me in every single time, right? So the best thing that I could give to the world is a refined version of myself. The best thing that you can give to your family is not, a salary or a charity. The best thing you can give to your family is a refined version of yourself. That's what God ultimately wants. Everything that you have, all the bracha in your life, all the circumstance that you find yourselves in, is there to help challenge you to become a greater human being. Where does that process begin? How do we measure that? It's called pnimi, your inner world. Your inner world affects your outer world. The famous story of the Chavetz Chaim, where there was a guy who said to the Chavetz Chaim, I want to take a position in a bank. So he says, okay. He's like, you could take the job, but on one condition. There's 2 jobs in the bank. There's a guy that does deposits, and there's a guy that does withdrawals. He's like, you cannot be the guy that does deposits in the bank. I want you to be the guy that's always in the withdrawal section of the bank. He's like, why? What difference does it make? He says, because if you're taking all day people's money, he's like, that process of just taking all day will turn you into a taker, because your outer reality will impact your inner reality. But if you're in a job where you're giving all day, you're in the withdrawal sections, right? Then you'll be more likely to be in a position of giving as opposed to wanting to take. That's an example of how what you do, what you're involved in, impact your inner world. Your outer world can impact your inner world, and your inner world can impact your outer world. Okay, last part. So number 1, we talked about the idea of sensitizing ourselves. We talked about the idea of working through and creating a self-restraint. Recognize that I'm not defined by my emotion, that I'm gonna hold back. And this last part of it is full transformation. Okay, we need like another 7 minutes. We'll go through this very quickly. Okay, the ultimate step in Musar is to rework the problematic soul trait so thoroughly that it no longer stands as a barrier to the light of holiness and connectivity of the soul. In Or Yisrael, which is a book that Rabbi Yisrael Salanta wrote, and most of these ideas are from that book, he speaks about the self-restraint stage of Musar practice we just considered, right? As a contrast, contrast it to this one, right? This is how it goes. The first is for the one to overcome his nature so that he does not commit evil. The second is to change one's nature that he performs good. So there's 2 processes here. One is, how do I make sure I don't slip back into the bad practice? And then the second practice is, how do I get myself into a place where I'm doing good? Okay? The second aspect is more difficult than the first. It's more difficult to transform one's nature than to overcome his nature. So we talk about this concept of aseh tov and sur meira, right? The idea of proactively doing good versus avoiding bad. Which one is better?
Sumera.
Why?
Then you can do seto.
The way I think of it is like this.
It's easier to not do something than do something.
It is a little bit, but I would say that it's greater to be involved in aseh tov than sur meira. Why? Think about what I said earlier. If your outside world impacts your inner world, right? So think about it like this. There's 2 ways of fighting darkness. You can pull out your sword and try to fight the darkness, or you can light a match. So fighting the darkness is sur meira. Aseh tov is lighting the candle. There's 2 ways of getting to those results. I'm a big believer that's got to be positive. And the more and more we work on the positive parts of where we want to get to, the more likely you're going to get there. If you're constantly working on refining yourself to get to that positive, doing the aseh tov action, it'll start resonating with you a little bit differently. You'll start feeling a little bit differently. You start relating to yourself in a way that's a little bit differently. So he says like this. He says, therefore, man must develop a stage by stage. He says, initially, you should strive to fulfill the precept of the Torah of turn from evil. Right? That's Surah Meirah. This is the first aspect of growth. Afterwards, you should strive to fulfill the imperative of to do good, which is the second more advanced level. But I would still say that it's true. Yes, you have to. If you can't, it's very hard to get to a place of doing good if you're still involved
With the Ra.
with the Ra.
That's it. When you
You're right that, but I'm
Shuvah,
correct.
First
you stop.
recognize what
And that's
you do
one way of
and
doing it.
stop.
So I find that it could be a generational thing, that for young people today, to say, there's two ways of doing it: stop eating non-kosher, or start eating kosher. Right. So I think it's harder to stop eating non-kosher, and it's easier to start eating kosher.
Swapping.
It's like a weird way, like it's like, do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's like a little bit of like.
Depend on the issue.
100%, but like but that's an example of what we would say like Asay Tov and Surah Meirah. Surah Meirah is like don't eat the treif. Asay Tov is eat the kosher, right? So like it's for some people, it's Rabbi, it's too hard for me. I can't keep all the kosher laws. I'm like, okay, well let's talk about how we can build up a stage, the steps that gets you to a place of keeping kosher. You're going to go out with your friends, and you can't tell them, well, let's go to some of the kosher restaurants here because they're not on the same level. I understand that. If you're going to go out with them, are you going to stop eating non-kosher cheese first, and tell them I'm only eating, when I go out,
Vegan.
I'm going vegan. And if you're ready to do a little bit more than that, then yeah, I'm only going out for drinks and not food. Until you get yourself to a place where you are able to identify yourself as a kosher eater. But it's not like, oh well, yeah, I don't eat non-kosher. I'm a kosher eater. Yeah. Or I am someone who is patient. I am someone who is kind, who is calm, who is persistent. I'm someone who is honorable. I am someone who is, who's loving and giving and understanding. All those positive traits is how you want to identify yourself with. Of course, if you're dealing with impatience and you're constantly having these explosions, and all you're saying is I'm going to be patient, you're not going to go anywhere. So part of it is the awareness part. First, being aware of the midah that you're trying to upgrade, and then it's the proactive, positive nature of you're refining yourself into something more. Okay, so he says that Rabbi Reuven writes in Cheshbon HaNefesh in the early 19th century, decades before the birth of psychology, right? He also cites Emmanuel Etkes and Rabbi Salant of the Muslim movement. It's clear that a considerable number of the emotions of the psyche are concealed in the hidden chambers of man's heart every day, one within another, so that he no longer knows and recognizes them. But the more deeply they're hidden, the more strongly do they act within the psyche. It follows then that a transformation in our thoughts, words, feelings, and actions requires practices that have an impact on that deep inner level as well. Musar masters developed this technique, many techniques transforming the soul traits, including visualizations, contemplations, and passion chanting. This visualization is a vivid image held in a mind. I always say this: if you can't have a picture of what the more patient version of you looks like, you're not going to get there. First, visualize it. Create an image in your mind's eye of what the best version of you looks like, and then work towards becoming that. Right? I tell people who are dating, you want to be in a relationship? Well, first visualize the kind of person you want to be in a relationship with, and then ask yourself, are you there yet? And then what are you doing working towards becoming that person? You can't stay where you are expecting things to change. That's insanity, right? You have to create the change within yourself to allow the outside world to change around you. Okay. He explains the visualizations. You have the rest of it on your own. Okay, so let's just end with this. God willing, next week, you can go through the rest you don't need the rest of the sheet. It's self-explanatory. What I want to do, God willing, next week is I'm going to go through, we're going to start with a midah, God willing. We're going to start with the 13 soul traits. And I'm going to give you homework every single week moving forward. For the next 13 weeks, God willing, you're going to have a journal. Okay, start journaling. Start thinking a little bit about what it means to be the best versions of yourselves. And for the next 13 weeks, we're going to pick one midah that you're going to work on for 1 week only. Now, just be mindful that this is a mini course in Musar, that if you really want to conquer a particular midah, it takes months of work. Benjamin Franklin was well known for someone who was always working on his midot. Okay, he created a charting system, the most effective charting system that I'm aware of. And he would have a chart daily, every day for like 50 years. He has books of him working on midot daily. He was one of the most prolific writers, printers, inventors. Where did all that come from? That came from someone who had a very clear vision of who he wanted to be, where he wanted to go, and never gave up on the dream. Never give up on the dream, my friends. Remember, a dream without a due date is a fairy tale. And we don't want you to live in fairy tale land. I want you to live in reality. Why? Because God creates a reality where you can have everything in the world, bliss. It's waiting for you, but you can't have that bliss
But that's if
if you're living in a fictitious world. What do you say? What hasn't happened?
Like let's say again, like if I put a date and I wanna do something in some certain date, and then it's just not happening.
There's two kinds of dates. There's things that I'm in control of. There's things that I'm not in control of.
Okay.
I can only work on the things that I'm in control of. I can't work on the things I'm not in control of. I can't impact somebody else's choices, right? I can't help someone else make the choices there. That's for them. I got to do my part. I got to play my role and my particular.
That's called ishtadlut.
That's part of ishtadlut. I gotta be the best version of myself, so that when I finish this world after 120, I could look back and say I tried.
Okay.
The rest is up to Hashem. I can't control everything else. I can't control the circumstances. I can't control the parents that gave birth to me. I can't control their thoughts. I can't control the environment I grew up in, the socioeconomic realities I grew up in. That was the world that I grew up in. That's what I needed, I guess. And the only thing I can choose is to figure out how I am going to respond to my circumstances. Sarah Schneerson, right? Who started the Bet Yaakov movement. Okay, most people don't know that she was divorced twice. She was a complicated person, she was.
Said, why the boys study and not the girls?
Yeah, and she said, you know what? She had a dream that said that, like there's all these schooling for boys. We need something now for the girls. The world is changing.
And
she single-handedly went to the rabbis, and everyone, like women who go up and stand in front of the big rabbanim of Europe. She was a bulldozer, and she had this.
Schneerson.
No. So she got up and she started the Bet Yaakov. She started the Bet Yaakov movement, right? She saw that she had a bigger purpose. She didn't allow the challenge, the embarrassment of her circumstances to hold her back from achieving greatness. She's like, I have a role to play here, and if it wasn't with a husband, she didn't. I don't think she had any children.
No.
But she saw herself as someone who was a servant of the people. And she used her life in a way where she was able to bring out the best change in herself and in the world around her. She can't control the circumstances. I can't control those things, but I'm going to make every moment of my life a meaningful one. So where do we begin? We start within ourselves. And God willing, we'll take this journey together, and we'll walk away hopefully being a little bit better human beings. And if we are able to become greater human beings, we bring more God into the world. If we bring more God into the world, we bring more light into the world, more simcha into the world, less suffering into the world. And Bezrat Hashem, Mashiach b'mehera b'yameinu. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and listening.
So long, and he doesn't want to come.
He wants to come.
He's here. We're not ready.